Yes, yes, Dev. That is delightful. Oh, more of it. Hello. Hello, my wizards. It's Dev from Mtg. We like it in Magic, and today we're going to burn it down. Sorry about that. I had a little tickle in my throat there. I don't know what that was, but let's check out the agenda for today. Here we are. It turns out we are, in fact, going to burn it down. A little Rakdos burn deck tech, everybody. A little Bernie Sanders, but let me be perfectly clear, despite the jokes. This is actually a pretty serious deck that I've been laddering with like relatively quickly on Arena lately, and I just kind of put it together as a goof because I wanted to play a couple of dumb cards, but it turns out deck is actually pretty sweet, so I threw it on the Patreon poll and ended up winning by one vote. It's the word I'm going for. One vote. Came from behind overnight, won by a single vote. A lot of people excited about Rakdos Burn. Let's go ahead and get to it.
Yo, I'm sorting through some heinous haters like a pooper scooper. I'm just trying to take my life like a Koopa Trooper. I'm double Mario, that mean I'm super. And I'm freaking dangerous like a Chupa Cabre. Got them all day like a Kanye, but I'm way better getting cheddar in Monterey. But Jack, you don't know, man. You got the show, man. You want roast beef? Well, I'm all this.
But first, sneaky rascal I am, make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, do the YouTube stuff. Check out the Patreon, deck list in the description, the TCG player, you know, the things. But I really want to talk about this deck, so let's go ahead and get into it, because this is actually another Kroxa deck. But bear with me here, because the last time we did Kroxa, it was Grixis. And that was a really good deck. I was also kind of addicted to the Lazav Kroxa thing that we had going on. A nice little love affair there. But at the end of the day, like, do we need like blue, right? It just forces me to play cards that I like, but are they truly good enough to completely compromise the mana base over? You know, things like Nicol Bolas that didn't pan out to the power level we thought they'd be in the last format. You know, Lazav, is it ever going to be a good card? Come on, man. I hope so. But it turns out at the end of the day, we can just drop blue entirely from this deck and make a much more consistent list with a completely different game plan that actually pans out like a lot of the time, surprisingly. Killer Croc here, Big Papa Croc, that's what we'll call him. He does two things really, really well, or it, I don't know, but either way, it does two things really well. Makes your opponent discard cards, and it doles out a whole bunch of damage. So I figured, that got the old noodle stimulated. Why don't we just make like a half burn, half discard thing and see how that works out, because that could have game against the mono red decks in the format, pick off all their small creatures, but also the control decks in the format, make them discard their grip full of disgusting cards, right? So it turns out it actually works the way you draw it up a good bit of the time, because Kroxa dovetails really nicely with some mechanics that have already been printed, namely the spectacle mechanic, because a lot of those cards get really, really cheap as long as you've already done damage to your opponent. Now, we want to fill our graveyard super fast with cheap spells so we can escape Kroxa more easily, quickly, and effectively, and it turns out all these spectacle spells do that super easily. And the best part is, like, you get to play the best spectacle cards and stay on theme, too, you know? Like, I said I wanted to build a red-black burn discard thing. Well, like, all the good spectacle cards do those things, right? So we're going to play 4 copies of Drillbit to illustrate that example. This card, first of all, turns from a noun into a command if you say it just right. But the best part about it is that it's just a precise, sort of pinpoint way to get specific cards out of our opponent's hands, which come into play. That matters in so many freaking matchups. Even if you have to play Drillbit on like turn 3 or 4, it still matters against decks playing Dream Trawler, Torbrand, Embercleave, Elspeth Conquers Death. That's 4 of the most popular cards in 2 of the most popular decks. Plus, you know, anybody trying to make Wilderness Reclamation work with Expansion Explosion, I mean, you can get both of those out of their hand really early. So there are just so many amazing targets for Drillbit. And again, fills your graveyard super fast if you can spectacle it. And that ain't hard in this deck, because we've got like literally half, I'm going to go ahead and tell you this stat. I think it's 29 cards in this deck are capable of going directly to the face. So it is not hard in any way to trigger Spectacle and just start slinging spells in your yard like crazy with stuff like Drillbit. And of course, we're going to light it up too. It's my kind of party. Lux is one of my favorite cards in the standard format. Has been since it was first released. I just love firing off this card for 1 mana, because draw 2 for 1 mana feels insanely powerful. And it's made even more powerful in this deck because, again, we're trying to fill our yard really fast, and just 1 red mana for this effect is amazing. So, and again, not hard to trigger Spectacle, so if you just have to, like, staple it onto a 1 or 2 damage removal spell, you're still really not spending much mana to draw a bunch of cards in that turn. You definitely play all 4 copies of this. And again, kind of like Drillbit, a bit of a no-brainer, even though it doesn't deal damage or make them discard cards, it facilitates you doing both of those other things. So, play all 4 copies of this. But like biggest no-brainer in the deck, right? While we're talking about spectacle cards, and we want to deal damage, let's play Lightning Bolt, right? Let's get rid of the critics in here. Topical for Oscar season, which you don't have to be a filmmaker. I think we all wish we could get rid of the critics sometimes. But anyway, still a silly card. It's sort of fallen out of favor in the mono-red aggro deck. There are different ways that deck is using its slots nowadays, but in a dedicated burn deck, like, yeah, hell yeah, we're going to play Lightning Bolt. It's the closest we're going to get in Standard. And just like all of our other spectacle cards, this has the capability of filling our graveyard really fast if we can get a copy or two of it in our opener. Now that I've shown you Skewer, that sort of opens the floodgates, because like almost literally the rest of the deck, save for another two of that I'm playing, is all burn. Everything else is burn from here on out, again, except for like the last card I'm going to show you. But I wonder if you can guess it. Let me know. But anyway, and don't skip ahead and then guess in the comment section like you're a smart person. Don't do it. But anyway, literally everything else in the deck does damage, almost. So let's start with a card you won't be shocked to learn that we're playing. The card I just said. We're playing 4 copies of Shock because, yes, the only reason I'm showing this copy is to remind you, and any newer players, that you can play with any printed version of a card that's ever been printed ever. So snag this Shock from Exodus, right here, do that. But wait, it was from Stronghold. Losing some cred here. It's from Stronghold. Anyway, play this Stronghold Shock. Because you got to play Shock in this deck, but I've probably wasted a little, like, too much time. So let's play Bone Crusher Giant as well, and do the Seth Rollins finisher sometimes. You know, just 2 damage to the face is not great for 2 mana, but it's, I mean, beggars can't be choosers, right? In Standard, there's just not really a whole lot of amazing burn cards. But if we're looking at like the best burn cards for a burn deck, this is like very high up on the list, because not only is it a burn spell, it's also like a dude, and we don't have like too many dudes. Like aside from Kroxa, this is the only creature in the entire deck. So you might want to take back your guess now if you've already guessed something in the comment section for the non-burn card that I'm going to show you. But in any case, this just super important because it actually gives us some form of board presence if we need it. That can be really important against control, especially if they're flat-footed, they don't have a good removal spell at the time. But this can also be sweet to just present a roadblock against other aggro decks and stuff. It allows us to just point spells at their face and block with our huge overstated creature rather than having to waste, burn spells on their creatures. But conversely, this can also just, get through a big group of small creatures. Use your burn in your hand to kill their small guys and get 3 for 4 with your Bone Crusher. It all kind of depends on the situation, but it's very important to have a card that's flexible in the deck. But we're also going to Slay Queen, yes, and that sentence in non-Zoomer language is we're going to play Slaying Fire in the deck, if you wanted a translation. Slaying Fire is actually really sweet, and I'm playing it over a different 3-drop burn spell that you could play. I'm playing that spell in the sideboard. We'll talk about it when we get there, but I'm playing this main deck because this can go hit creatures, and honestly, being able to take out 4 toughness creatures, kind of a big deal in this format against opposing Torbrands, and even like Archon of Sun's Grace random stuff some of the time, but it's really good to be able to take out slightly bigger creatures than we normally would be. Questing Beast, there's a lot of good examples, so I've really, really liked playing this card as a removal piece some of the time, but obviously against control decks and other slow ball junk, you can just like hit him in the face for 4 damage, and that's also really decent at instant speed. Now we're getting into the slightly less impressive burn spells. There's kind of a hierarchy here, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about Shaundra's Pyro Helix, which I wasn't like super excited for it to be part of the deck's DNA. See what I did there? But I kind of like this card a lot now. Take out a variety of X1s, and against mono red, that's really important. You can 2 for 1 mono red with this card a lot, and sometimes you can just kill like a 10 street dodger, go face, activate Spectacle for the turn, and that's a really good way to go with this card too. So just killing Edgewall Innkeepers and other like X1 creatures, really important, and you have no idea how many X1 creatures are in this format until you start playing with this card and realizing how good it is. Like I've killed multiple Healer's Hawks a couple of times with this card. It's just it's actually pretty sweet action, but even if all it does is go to the face for 2, it's good for that too. We're also going to the Dark Carnival here, getting down with the clowns. We're going to play in 3 copies of Carnival Carnage here. The first non-4 of in the deck, because like I don't love this card, but I just made the argument, and it stands true, that there's a bunch of X1s, like 1 toughness creatures in this format right now, and Carnival can snipe them pretty good while also still triggering Spectacle for the turn. There's also been a couple of times where our opponent has like used Teferi to bounce a Kroxa, which is often terrible for us, but still, use a Teferi to bounce a Kroxa, or a Bone Crusher or something like that. Well, Carnival finishes that Teferi off, hits him in the face, triggers Spectacle for the turn. That's so sweet. And even if we don't have like a creature or a planeswalker to target, later on in the game, this is like a sort of a Blightning kind of effect, you know? Making them discard 2 cards that's a lot of cards against control decks. And sometimes you just go ahead and fire this off on turn 4. Hey, you take 3, discard 2. What are you going to do about that? Like, it's actually kind of a sweet card. And again, it's on theme if nothing else. This does both. Por qué no los dos? Get you somebody that can do both, and this card definitely can. So it's in the deck for no other reason than that, but it turns out that in playtesting, this card has been really sweet on a number of occasions. Don't just, like, think it's bad. It's actually, like, a lot better than I thought it was, at least. But if you think that card is bad, and I know that some of you probably do, some of you are like, whatever, Carnival Carnage is great, but there are people who are like, dude, that card is terrible. If you thought that card was bad, and it was tough to pitch to you how good it was, just imagine having to make, just imagine yourself in my position, having to make the pitch for Fruit of Teasers. Like, I actually ended up on 2 copies of this card, and like, low-key, actually kind of high-key, this card is the whole reason that I wanted to try to build this deck in the first place. Everything else just kind of fell into place. I was like, oh yeah, you can play Kroxa. Oh yeah, if you're playing Kroxa, you can play like Spectacle stuff and fill your yard, blah, blah, you know, like all that kind of came later. First, I just wanted to play Fruit of Teasers. I wanted to know, you know, I know this is a forbidden fruit to talk about in Standard because the card is obviously like pretty awful looking on its face, but I've actually kind of really liked this. It's like late game reach. You know, it's something that a burn deck really, really needs. And if we either don't have a Kroxa in our yard or, and this actually happens on occasion, it's not advantageous to cast Kroxa out of our yard. This is actually like a pretty sweet option because like the first one deals 2, the second one deals 2, you hit him again, it deals another 2. I mean, this can be responsible for 6 or in some games as much as 10 damage over the course of the game. That should be an achievement. If there are achievements on Arena. There's not. But there should be achievements on Arena, I guess is the argument I'm making. But I have dealt 10 damage in a game with Fruit of Teasers twice, ladies and gentlemen. So, like, you can take this card all the way. The burn deck obviously doesn't have all the pieces it needs to deal 20 as quickly as possible in the standard environment, at least. You know, we're not playing Modern or Legacy here, or even Pauper, for that matter. But, you know, in the standard environment, again, we can't be like too picky about what we play. And even though I think there might be better things to play than Fruit, this card has won me games on multiple occasions and again done a buttload of damage over the course of an entire game. So I'm standing Fruit of Teasers right now, and I think you should try out the 2 copies before you blow it off. But we've made it to that other card that I'm playing that's not a burn card. So what could it possibly be? Well, I'm playing 2 copies of Underworld Breach. That's what it turned out to be. There's a bunch of stuff you could play in this slot if you wanted to. You know, I've got Torbrand written down on my notepad here. You could play some Torbrand if you wanted, but like Torbrand felt a little bit slow, doesn't really contribute to our plan of filling the graveyard, and late in the game I want to either be filling the graveyard still and get those last couple of cards in there for Kroxa, or I just want to be getting Kroxa out, right? So I think Torbrand could be a good addition, but I didn't end up doing that. So what you could also play like Perforce's Intervention. There's some stuff here, but Perforce's Intervention did not go to the face reliably enough the way I want it to. You know, Brazen Borrower is a card. So we'll talk about Brazen Borrower another day. I'm so sick of it. In any case, turns out that Underworld Breach is the card for this deck. You don't want to play too many copies of it, and honestly, I'm thinking about like cutting it down to 1 copy. I just don't really know. Like, what do we put, a 3rd Fruit of Teasers or a 4th Carnival Carnage? I don't know about that. I think in most situations, I'd rather just draw the Underworld Breach, but you don't really want the card in your opening hand, so I don't want to play that many copies of it. You don't even really want to draw into it on turn 2, 3, 4. You want to get this if the game goes long, and you have like 7 or 8 lands out, you know, it's turn 12. And honestly, if you can help it, you don't want the game to get to that point in the first place. So this isn't really an Underworld Breach deck. It's just a deck where Underworld Breach can come in handy when you top deck it on turn 9 or whatever. And in those situations, it usually does win the game for you. There's been only a couple of times, I think, where I've drawn this card in the extremely late game and not won immediately. And I think it's because the opponent had Absorb one of those times. That was awful. But, God, just so many bad control cards. I mean, they're too good, I guess is what I'm saying. But in any case, Underworld Breach is just an unbelievable card when you can get it and you have enough lands to recast, a Shock, and then a Skewer, and then a Skewer, and that's usually your entire graveyard at that point. But you also just did 8 damage, and if that didn't close the game out, you were doing something wrong in the first place. So Underworld Breach, I think, is the card I want to play in these last couple of slots, but I'll acknowledge there's a bunch of stuff you could do. But if you do want the Underworld Breach plan, I really don't suggest that you play 4 copies. Let me just put it that way. Now, we got 21 lands in this deck because our curve is relatively low, but I don't really want to push it below 21 lands, especially considering it costs 4 to escape Kroxa out of the yard. It's going to cost 4 for some of our sideboard cards. So I think at least 21, if not 22 lands. Maybe that's what we cut the Underworld Breach for, is a 22nd land. Anyway, this is the list I've been rocking so far, and we got 17 red sources, 12 black sources. We don't need anywhere near as many black sources, but do note the Castle Locthwain in there, which very often comes into play tapped, especially if we get it early, but I don't care. If the game does go late, we really need a card advantage piece, so it's sweet to have Castle Locthwain to draw us into more burn. But here is your sideboard. Yes, sorry, it's terrible French accent. I actually have patrons in France, so I shouldn't do that. But anyway, here's a sideboard for you, starting with Plague Crafter. One of the most important cards on the board, but it really does one very specific thing. It is in the deck almost solely to deal with Plague Crafter. To deal with Dream Trawler. A lot of suspense there. But you probably knew what I was getting to anyway. Dream Trawler is a serious problem card for this deck. A lot of cards in blue-white control can be. Honestly, Teferi's very good against Kroxa. Obviously, Absorb is really good against our plan, but Dream Trawler is the ultimate nail in the coffin, so we've got to get them to sacrifice that thing immediately. It is worth bringing in 4 copies of Plague Crafter, believe you me, but it's also pretty decent against the various green-white Enchantress lists in the format that have like Karametra's Blessing and whatnot. So just keep that in mind. Not a bad card for certain decks, but mostly we're just trying to get rid of Dream Trawler. But anyway, we also have 4 copies of Risk Factor. This is the other 3-mana burn spell I was talking about way back then when we were talking about Slaying Fire. Remember those? Those were good times. Risk Factor is just amazing against control, but it's not very good against almost anything else in this format right now. Most of the time, at least. So we're also playing 2 copies of Eat to Extinction in here. This is also specific. This is mostly against Heliod, but pretty much any god, it's against Thassa and stuff like that. But I really hate Heliod. If there's another deck this deck hates as much as it hates blue-white control, it hates life gain so much, and it's got to get problem permanents off the battlefield against that deck. Luckily, most of our burn can, but obviously if Heliod sticks, we got an issue. So we're playing Eat to Extinction in here. But note, this can take out all kinds of stuff, Planeswalker removal, whatever. So there are many functions for Eat to Extinction, but Heliod's the big one. Aside from that, there's also Tibalt, 3 copies of Tibalt. This completely renders useless things like Dream Trawler. They have to attack into it, so keep that in mind. They will attack into it and kill it. But still, for the time being, this renders things like Dream Trawler completely useless, and this makes things like Absorb not work, which is huge. Things like Birth of Melodus, when it pops off on its 3rd chapter, don't gain them the life. All that's huge. Huge. Same thing with the life gain deck. If they're playing, the Heliod, Linden, Johnny's Primate thing. This is obviously an amazing card to have against them. So yes, 3 copies of Tibalt. It's only 35 cents, but hey, if you want to splurge and spend a whole $1, you can get the Japanese one, and it looks freaking amazing. I just want to point that out. But anyway, we're finishing it off with 2 copies of Experimental Frenzy, which honestly, I feel like you could lobby for in the main deck over Underworld Breach. In a lot of games against control, I've seen more value off of this than I have off of Underworld Breach on later turns. So there is that to consider. But honestly, Experimental Frenzy is a little bit clunky, all things considered. Overall, I felt like Underworld Breach was the better main deck card, but I'm willing to take the L on that. You know what I mean? I think Frenzy might be the better call for the main deck, all things considered. But even if you don't end up playing Breach and you do end up playing Experimental Frenzy main, I think the Breach is still a definite contender for the board. Just let me know how you feel about that in the comments down there. Now here are your power rankings. Final score Nintendo 64. Not half bad, really, for a deck with a bunch of we're playing Fruit of Teasers in this deck, right? Most of the other cards are relatively powerful, at least. The entire Spectacle package is powerful. Kroxa is powerful. Our entire sideboard is powerful. By the way, I was thinking another good card for the board that I haven't mentioned yet, Storm's Wrath. That's interesting. I haven't tried it yet, but I think it's better than things like Cry the Carnarium, Flame Sweep, all that stuff. And this would allow you to just blow up a bunch of small aggro creatures and concentrate your burn spells to the face. So that's a theory, but I haven't tried it yet. Something else I want you to give me your input on down there on the sideboard. But in any case, let's back to the power score. 64, really not too bad, but this, even though this looks like a budget deck, it's kind of not. This deck's like $175 right now. That's mostly due to blood crypts and the fact that Kroxa is still fairly expensive. I don't know how long it's going to hold, but it's still a fairly expensive card. I really like the plan here. I love decks that get to play a bunch of really cheap, inexpensive spells, just dump our yard. We get a bunch of like really cool effects off of those spells in the meantime. Finish them off with a Kroxa. It's just a kind of a time-honored, tried and true strategy of spell slinging. It kind of plays like an Is It Spells deck in some ways. It really heavily reminds me of like a red-blue spells deck or a storm deck even some of the time. So just give this thing a shot. I have had a blast with this thing, and again, it's impressed me beyond like any expectations that I had for it at the beginning of the project. So let me know if you get a chance to mess around with this thing, and let me know how you do with it, because again, it can be difficult to pilot, but especially after boards, we've got pretty good matchups. So again, I want to know how you do with this thing. I've done pretty well with it myself, if I'm any indicator, but I'm just one person. That's not a very good sample size, so I just hope you get a chance to play it. It's a really fun deck, and again, it can do things. But anyway, I gotta bring it down. I feel like I've been like at a higher pitch for this video. That's how you can tell I think a deck is really good, like really good, better than usual. It's because I talk like this the entire time, and it's just a really good deck, you guys. I haven't even had any coffee all day, which is really odd for me. I start my day with coffee every day. Haven't had a single one for some reason. I am jacked up, son, and I think it's mostly because I really do believe in this deck. Too, but give this thing a shot again if you can. Link in the description to TCG Player. That's the lowest price place you're going to get it on the internet. That's always hard to say. That is where you're going to spend the least money on it. So hit the link in the description for that. Helps your dude out when you do it. And also, you can hit up the Patreon if you want to really help your boy out. $1 a month to vote on what we do around here, and just to support the content. If you like what we do around here, $1 a month helps more than you can possibly imagine. But if you want to help me out for free, just hit the like button on your way out, or subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. Lots of more content coming your way. Check out the standard tier list. Just did this the other day. One of my favorite projects of the season so far. But there's also this dank jank that we did just yesterday. This is probably the most fun I've ever had recording a video. This, I hate to say, but at least recording a gameplay video, this is probably the most fun I've ever had. Again, if you're talking about a deck that exceeded expectations, go check out this gameplay of Mono Black Vampires. This is really good. But anyway, I guess I'm done for this one. So I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. No matter what you do, make sure you spread love and be kind.